Yes, we have started recording. So, all right, if somebody else is joining, just let me know. Otherwise, if somebody can admit them into the room, it'll be good. So, let's get started, everyone, to this study group session. My name is Jamin Tanna. Today, we will be talking about the personality theory and assessment. In this subject, we will be talking about discussing the three topics. Yeah, we will be talking about personality development. We will be talking about proprium or the self, and then we will be also talking about the Hornis social foundation. Yeah, some of the links that I have, so this YouTube link is where I post my these group study session links. So once it is up there, I will let you know. And if you want to be in touch with me, I have put some links over there. So let's get started and hope we can have this as a dialogue. Otherwise, we will complete the session fast. It will be good if we can have a discussion and dialogue so that we all can remember based on that discussion things for our exam. Okay, so let's get started. From a personality development perspective, this was one of the very nice commentary I picked up from our books. So the distinctive pattern of behavior helps one define one's identity. Yeah, and there is a lot of discussion around individuality. But if you see what say Kluckhohn and Murray in 1953 came out is, while commenting on the individuality, they said that in some respects we are like all others, in some aspect we are like some others, and in some aspect we are like no other person who has been there in past, is in present, or even will exist in the future. Yeah, that's a very nice way of putting the context of individuality, that we all are like all others, like some others, and like no others, all put together to come out into this concept of an individual person. Yeah, individuality. So I found it very interesting how they cover the entire spectrum of all, some, and like no other altogether. Yeah, it's not only about being like no other that defines our individuality. It's actually a mix of all of that. So with that as a basis for personality development, let's look into a little bit more into the topic, all the topics that we will cover. So we will cover personality development. This has been a topic, even in the latest psychology world, a lot of psychologists are trying to define things around this. From the very beginning, this has been one of the crucial topics of psychology forums. Then we talk about proprium or the self. I think I did a spelling mistake here. It's proprium. Then the self of humanist standpoint versus the behaviorist standpoint. So Freud's and others versus what humanist standpoint is around the self. And then Hornis Social Foundation. She was one of the main persons who defined the neurosis in a best way possible. And we will look into the topic of neurosis and how it is an interpersonal control and coping mechanism. Most of us do this day to day, but the difference being that if the person is a neurotic person, they are sinking too fast into this. They are not able to cope up and not able to control the interpersonal relationships and the demands that they have from life. Yeah, so that's the difference, the thin line difference between a neurotic person. But what they really want is something that all the humans want. Yeah. So Honey's Social Foundation is a very nice, again has a good build up from Freud. Yeah, Freud, like we have it from personality development and even the proprium, the self. Yeah. So let's start with the first topic of the personality development. There are multiple factors that affect the personality. Uh, we have the biological factors, we have the uh, psychological factors, and we have the environmental factors. We will look at biological factors and environmental factors in a little detail, and psychological factors we will brush through. So some of the and this is very important to understand. We are not talking about individual personality itself here. We are talking about the concept of personality development. Yeah, how these factors affect the development. Of course, this doesn't mean that if a person is only very good build, then he or she has a good personality. Yeah, you can develop your personality into any of these things, what the end product could be. But what factors affect the development is something that we are discussing here. So the first biological factor is the body build. So essentially with body build, the things that come into our concept is already we know what can or cannot be done with a particular body type. Yeah, for example, if somebody is really fat or obese, we know he or she cannot be a very good sprinter, for example. Yeah, or the person himself knows, oh, maybe this is something that my body cannot do this. Yeah, for example, I try to do a lot of yoga, but I know that I can't do a complete heels over head kind of a chakrasana, for example. I can do it decent enough, but I can't go until that. Of course, I can train myself, but with my current body type, I will not be able to do. So can and cannot do is something that will come first with for the person himself, as well as judgment towards others when we have a body type. That judgment then brings us to the reaction that the person may experience from the self uh, against the in comparison to a superior or an inferior body type. Yeah, for example, again, as I said, if I have a if I'm interested in yoga, and if I see a particular body type, lean, flexible, etc., I my reaction to that person would be much more respectful when it comes to yoga. Yeah, versus if I say somebody, maybe this person is not fit enough, is he or she cannot do the yoga. Yeah, in that concept or in that context of what one can or cannot do, there will always be reactions towards the superior or inferior body type. This then affects the positive self concept versus negative self concept, and that then eventually transforms into your personality development. We will look a little bit detail into body type as well, of what psychologists have done and classified. Physical attractiveness. Now, this is very interesting. It is from lot of studies, it is seen that people are more tolerant in their attitudes and even their judgment towards the people whom they find are physically attractive. Yeah, so much so that even as kids and child, right, starting from nursery, for example, yeah, it is very easily seen that the pretty child is less punished, for example. Yeah. Um, so much so that even when we grow up and we see the business circle and corporate world, there are these very evident scenarios of promotion patterns where a skill set of a physically attractive person in comparison to maybe a non-attractive person might be a little less, but still he or she gets promoted. Yeah, and there is also an influence area, which means that if we are a part of a group of these physically attractive, whatever that means, group, the likelihood of growth and getting a growth is easier. Yeah, again, very judgmental topic, but the research has shown that this happens. This is how humans work. Yeah. uh, Again, as an aspect of personality development, this is what we want to tell affects your personality. How much do you allow this to affect is something that completely depends on you. Yeah.
Jamin, KL here.
Yes.
With your permission, if I can just
Yes.
share one experience, and I completely support this statement.
Yes.
A couple of years ago, I was in the UK for almost a month, where we were actually pursuing a new deal.
Mm-hmm.
When I was with IBM.
Mm.
Now, there was one gentleman. He was of Punjabi descent, and he had been in the UK for the last 4 or 5 years. But he was
Right.
basically, working in our India office at Gurgaon, and
Right.
he had moved to the UK and settled there. Right. So we had basically gone out for a nice lunch, and we were coming back to the office. In London, IBM office in London. And like most of us would have, after a heavy lunch, we would have actually gone for the, lift or the elevators, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But this guy, because there were a bunch of other, guys, whites around with us, basically, he just told me in Hindi uh, that let's walk the stairs, and even if somebody said, are you not coming, and say no, we prefer to walk the stairs, right? And then I said, you must be crazy, because we had to climb 3 floors, okay, and these were real big and tall floors, okay.
Right.
And I was almost puffing and panting at the end of the third floor.
Right.
And during this flight of stairs, he was, of course, a fit Punjabi, but me being me, a typical South Indian and well-rounded, I actually was panting for breath. But
Right.
what he told me was very, very shocking and startling, because he said people will judge you and say that this guy is fat, or this guy is, out of shape. So we cannot give him probably a responsibility which is a critical client deliverable. And I was surprised,
Right.
because I was thinking about how is somebody equating a deliverable with maybe my physical appearance, right? And I was, even if I looked fat, I was actually having gone to the gym, or somebody who was very fit, and that sort of stuff. But you're right, so they actually had that in their mindset.
Yes.
And once we reached, and before the meeting started, the head of the whole deal, the project, he said, hey, Kale and Dhruv actually walked up the stairs while you lazy guys actually took the elevator, and he was not even anywhere close to us, but
Yeah.
the information has passed. So he says,
Right.
I really appreciate those guys. Those guys are the guys who will deliver this project,
Right.
and it had got nothing to do. We had not even kickstarted the project.
Yeah. I mean, that is called an hello effect. Yeah, we will talk. So I have one other
Okay.
slide that we have for physical attractiveness.
Yeah.
There is a concept of hello effect, and that is where your example perfectly fits in. Yeah.
Okay.
We will talk about it. But thank you for sharing, KL, that example.
Yeah.
Okay. Then we go to the third factor. So homeostasis. Homeostasis is more of environmental challenges that we want to have, and how it affects our internal environment also. So this is where we can have either that we cannot handle it too at all, or we handle it too much. So both of them is not really great. So hyper. We also talk and touch a little bit about neurotism here, and then neurotism essentially, they, in a book it was very nicely covered where they also use the word spirituality. Yeah. So they really compared neurotism as an differentiator between either a person is a neurotic person or a spiritual person, because that is now then defined by her blood pressure, right? So is your internal environment, your blood pressure, in control when there are challenges in the situation? Is your internal environment completely in control? It's like a spiritual state. Yeah. Versus neurotic state where it's not in control at all, there is too much of anxiety, you're not able to control their challenges. So it has a biological impact. And other biological impact that we talk about are like vitamin D and excess glucose in blood. So much so that these could be the factors for affecting your mental state, which means you could be more prone and you would feel more depressive mood swings if these things are not balanced properly. So if you have, say, less vitamin D, if you have too much of glucose in your blood, the depression states could be higher, for example. Yeah. And that is also one of the differentiator, where if there is diet, nutrition, and lifestyle is well balanced. So homeostasis is all about balancing your internal environment based on the challenges that you would get from external. Yeah. So that is what homeostasis talks about. Very pragmatic approach to looking at how quote unquote spiritual or balanced you are versus um, how neurotic you could be because of these biological states. Yeah. Okay, so that is homeostasis. After homeostasis comes physical defects. Again, obesity is one of the things where higher the obese person would have a lot of limitation. And again, this limitations from a perspective of affecting your personality development. Yeah, we are always talking in construct of how this affects your personality development, not necessarily your personality itself. Yeah. I mean, I have a friend who is very obese in looks, but I mean, she can do full splits. Yeah. So while I would, from a body type and physical defect perspective, I would think that this person, but that person did not allow that to limit the personality development. Yeah. But we are talking about what by default would affect a personality development, and you have to work around it. And then health conditions, of course. This is one of the very important topic, and also with the current times of COVIDs and etc. Right? I mean, there is a huge study around this. Sometimes the personality changes even after recovery from a bad health condition is almost permanent or seen to sustain even beyond the recovery. Yeah, which means biologically you would recover, from an illness, from a health condition, but your personality changes, then either not recovering so soon or not recovering at all from that period. Yeah, that is one of the things. From other aspects, diabetic persons, it's hard. It definitely affects the personality development. For ladies, the irregular menstrual cycles definitely affects and mood swings and personality at that point in time. And it really affects all of this. The entire health condition affects together the self concept. Yeah. So how it's about how secured am I as a self. So when your health conditions are not right, your security of concept of self is a little shaken, which then affects your personality. Yeah. And one of the most important thing is the first point that I would like to re-stress again, especially because of the current times. There are these personality changes that happen to people which sustains beyond the recovery period of the health condition. Yeah. So health condition, actually the imprints of health issues go on personality way beyond. Yeah. So recovery per se, from a from a biological standpoint, the recovery could have been achieved, but a complete recovery is only when the recovery is achieved from a personality standpoint and a security of self. Yeah. So that is something that we have to consider as psychologists when we talk about health. Okay, so let's look at some of these things a little quickly in detail. So body type, ectomorph, mesomorph, and endomorph. Yeah. So ectomorph are these narrow hips, small joints, thin build, stringy muscles, long limbs. Yeah. Mesomorphs are a little more thinner joints, narrow waist, but they also have long and round muscle beliefs, for example. And endomorph is a little more chubby on the thighs, on the hips. They are a little wide, shorter limbs. Yeah. And based on these different types, there is also a perception of what this person could be. Yeah, the concept or the judgment. Yeah, always, as I mentioned. um, Again, this three categories, although are well defined, most of us, or maybe many of us, are a mix of all of these things. Yeah, we are not really a complete typical ectomorph or typical mesomorph or a typical endomorph. It could be mix of this, and based on that, the judgment, the concept, and positive or negative self, the reaction to superior, inferior, or what I can or can't do completely changes. Yeah, so there could be a mix of these things that we can or can't do based on these defined categories, right? So that is something that we have to understand. And this then affects the personality overall. So for example, if there is a personality of mesomorph being very athletic, but I'm partly say mesomorph, but I'm also an endomorph, which means I can surprise people with some of these um, uh, athletic capabilities, but then maybe I'm not really a very good sustain. I don't have too much of sustenance, for example, in cardios. That could be one of the ways of looking at it. Yeah. So these are the body types that affect the personality. Let's look at some other topics. Physical attractiveness here, for example, the halo effect. Yeah, and it's very funny, all of this thing, right? From the child until the business promotions, everything gets seemingly affected on this. Um, this is the halo effect, and this is where KL was talking about. Yeah, so perceiving people who are physically attractive to also possess other positive characteristics. For example, believing them to be funnier, smarter, kinder, etc. Yeah, and I mean, if just because a person is physically attractive does not mean anything else necessarily. Yeah, but we have this halo effect. Okay, so if you are not physically fit, if you are not physically attractive, maybe for example, you are not the person who can deliver a very multi-million deal project, for example, as KL was telling. Yeah, and this is an halo effect. It plays majorly on the physical attractiveness, and but also supported with say, for example, your body build type. Yeah. Okay, so homeostasis, I think we covered in detail. So what happens? So when there is an imbalance, this is homeostasis cannot handle it. So your internal changes, etc., would change. You would be much more neurotic rather than a balanced person. Yeah. So I put some pointers here for you to refer to later as well. Uh, and that for me completes the biological factors. Yeah. So any comments, any personal experience that anybody wants to share, so that it just itches in our brain, like KL gave. Any feedback, anything that you say, oh, this doesn't work in reality. Any inputs from anybody?
Jameen,
Yes.
so I mean, we have seen in many cases where probably there is some childhood experiences that actually changes the personality or influences the personality, right? And I'm just giving an example, like for example, in the case of Oprah Winfrey, right? I think she was molested or raped as a child, and so one is the fear factor, which probably um, influences the way that personality develops to become. But somewhere, I don't know, at some point in time there is a metamorphosis, or a complete transformation in terms of that fear psychosis changing into something which becomes a source of strength, right? So if you look at what Oprah Winfrey has become, she's one of the famous webcasters, or has these series that she runs. And she's taken up various issues which could be maybe right from a disturbed childhood to obesity related issues, various social problems, and address those, right? So somewhere at some point in time she was also somebody who was abused, which contributed to a change in her personality, but that somehow actually also became a strength, right?
Strength later,
Because she was
yes.
able to champion the cause. So my question was, in terms of particularly the personality change, why or how do some people end up to become such strong champions, while some still suffer, uh, not being able to come out of that, right? It could be an incident from childhood, or just a thought I had,
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, just in this from the perspective of this chapters, yeah, I mean, what we discussed from an opera use case is much more psychological than I mean, there was obesity related or maybe issues like that on the body, but coming back to the psychological factors, I think this is where the things would come more important. And here is where, say, your emotional determinants and self disclosure, for example, I think, are you can you bring that security back into self, is something that comes up much more important, is what I would think. But we, maybe that is after this chapter, when we talk about the other two things, the states and the neurosis part, I think there the thing of this discussion might become a little much more relevant. Yeah, because in all of the personality development, I think what they are trying to tell us across all of these chapters, at least to start with, is um, the security in self. Yeah. uh, as and when that is established, and whatever that self could be, yeah, I mean, Maslow went out to against Freud and others to find the best of the human beings rather than looking at worst like Freud was doing. And he found that, okay, best of the human beings, Einsteins of the world, etc., during his period, or others, right, for example, they are all flawed. Yeah, there is no perfect human being concept. I think as in when we strike that kind of approach and to a concept of being a secured self, I think it brings in that switch, is what I would like to believe from these chapters. But currently all of these chapters are telling the things that could affect us negatively. Yeah, so that is the premise currently. But maybe that self security is the cornerstone, so called, that maybe even Maslow was trying to talk about.
Hi, Jemin. Subiksha here. Thank
Hi.
you for taking us through a very interesting topic, and I think you've
Mm.
covered very relevant aspects. I think we don't realize often, how our perception is tainted by inherent biases.
Right.
I also was wondering, the two things, right? Personality development also heavily depends on conditioning.
Yes.
Conditioning is also the stories we tell ourselves when
Yes.
we're much younger, plus what we are told by the outside world. It
Yes.
may be that, a person who's fat or thin, or there's always no getting it right. Either somebody's too thin or too dark or too fair or
Hmm.
too fat, right?
Hmm.
So do we start thinking this way, or are we made to think this way? Because I don't know if when we're young, we think this way, or I don't know when we start comparing, or
Yeah.
if that's something that's, imposed subconsciously.
Yes. No, a very, very beautiful point. Yeah, I'm already getting goosebumps. So there are topics of self-development and neurosis again, which covers these factors. But the very immediate next step after, so body build is one, right? That is only from a limitation perspective that we address. Yeah, all of these biological factors. Yeah, this is more or less from what you can or can't do and what it affects from your health perspective. That is what we covered here. But then later, for example, what KL was trying to tell is all the psychological factors, so the emotional determinants, and we'll cover this topic quickly. And where now you are talking about is a little more the famous debate in psychology world, nature versus nurture. Yeah. So the environmental conditions of the
Right.
social acceptance, social deprivation, how it affects from a childhood perspective. This is, I think, we will cover a little bit over here. Yeah. So, but to give a short answer, I think the debate between nature and nurture, either or, will never end, and it has never ended in psychology world. So it is both a little bit. Yeah, it is a little bit of nature, say the DNAs of the world, the science around that, but also nurture, which means the way when we grow up, what happens with us, what is the thinking? Are we deprived of social interactions in early age because of whatever? Yeah, I'm too dark in the dark skinned in the place where everybody was fair skinned, so I was socially deprived. Yeah, that nurturing aspect plays a role. It plays on our head, definitely, but it's not only always that. There is a nature, there is a very inherent human flawness that we have, that we need to understand how it works, and only in that there is freedom. But beyond that, there is no freedom. Yeah, there is, by nature we are like that in certain situations, for example.
Got it. Thank you. Also, I think our perception may be tainted initially when we look at somebody that we consider attractive. We might inherently be good, but that totally is subject to change. After the next couple of months or years or whatever.
Absolutely.
That might be an initial impression. It might go either way. But that's subject to change because of the behavior.
Absolutely. I think this is one of the topics that we covered in advanced social psychology in one of the last session that I took. Yeah, where how do we judge the other person? It starts with maybe a particular way, but then we recognize other qualities or flaws, and then cumulatively, how does it affect eventually? Yeah, is it additive? Is it multiplicative? How do we see it, and how our perception changes for a person as we go ahead? Absolutely. Again, very much part of what you said. Yeah, it's like an environment. It's a nurturing aspect rather than nature aspect.
Thank you.
Jamin, this is Satya.
Yes.
I just want to add what Swati said.
Yes.
Again, if you see the culture, correct? The culture where the person has grown up. That is also another factor.
Oh, beautiful. Yes.
Which add the personality, correct?
Yes.
Basically, if you see the person is grown up in a village, the personality will be different. The person who is grown up in a city, his personality will be different, correct?
Yes.
So again, the surrounding and environment, both of them matters.
Absolutely.
And nature, if the person's nature is a kind of learning nature, whenever he goes to a city or when you goes to a different culture or diversities, correct?
Yes.
He can inbuild or he can add the personalities to himself and he can grow up from there.
Yes.
Again, here comes the mindset.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So mindset also plays another factor. As Kale said about fear, correct? So when you think about the fear, no doubt people those who have weaker mindset or they're not that much strong mentally. So when they goes to a surrounding, like in the corporate world or maybe in public sector, wherever they goes, and they see the people talking against him or talking about him or her, sometimes what happens, they take it into their mind, and in that fear, basically they try to adopt some different kind of awkward kind of personalities.
Yeah.
So if we talk about personalities and surrounding, as you said, nurture and nature, correct? So no doubt both are the very important factor which plays on a person to have a better personality, or how he's going to make his personal life, correct? So how he's going to add it into his personality.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Hi, Jamin.
Yes.
Yeah, I would just like to mention, Alport has defined personality as something that is dynamic.
Right.
So like everybody is talking about like, that how Oprah Winfrey could overcome things and, So I think it's more about personality not being a permanent thing. It's about being very fluid. It's about being dynamic. It's about us being able to choose beyond the biology and beyond the nurturing also.
Yeah.
Basic,
Absolutely.
Shalini,
about
Shalini KL here, absolutely. And just because Jameen mentioned this was also a good opportunity to discuss, I just brought that up. I'll just take another 10 seconds. What I was actually alluding to is that there are a lot of people who are influenced by certain events that have happened in their childhood. Some of them are the successful ones like Oprah, but there are still many who just go wasted, or it ultimately ends up their personality to become formed in a particular manner, which and they may not end up as being who's who in life. That was what I was alluding to. So why is that although we know personality and its development is something very elastic or plastic, right? Why is it that that was the whole question?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say,
Yeah.
that we are beyond the biology, but
Yeah.
yes, like we have to understand the aspects, but we are still beyond the biology and the psychology also.
Right.
So therein comes the changes, like as you were talking about Oprah, or people who overcome things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you, all of you. So, okay, let's continue. Let's talk. I think we spoke about it, so we can rush through some of these topics. Some of the very other interesting. The second and the third for me are the second topic and the third topic for me again are much more important and interesting. I hope we can have a much more discussion there. So, psychological factors. Many psychological factors, as we were discussing, can be playing the role. We cannot learn all of them in this context of the session, so or in our chapter, for example. So there are these four main ones. So intellectual determinants, the emotional, the self disclosure, and aspiration and achievements. Yeah. Intellectual, this one is a two-sided sword. Yeah. So too much of intellectual capacity and we are talking about again in context of personality development. Yeah, I just always want to bring back the topic to that. So this can be a two-sided sword where there will be a lot of judging based on intellectual perception. There could be always a too much superior intelligence can also affect the personality development unfavorably. Yeah, which means from a social standpoint. I mean, jokingly, but think about a Sheldon Cooper use case. Yeah, I mean, he's good, and we all love. If you all see The Big Bang Theory, or if some of you know about it, there's this very geeky kind of a person. We like to see him. It's good fun, but look at his life. It's really not a social life. Yeah, his personality it affected his personality unfavorably from a perspective of personality developing, which helps you socially connect and perform in the social world. Yeah. So from that perspective, it can affect unfavorably also, and influences the development of your values and morality also. Now your intellectualness. Yeah. So sometimes simple intellectuals are much more adaptive to the general values and morality that are defined. For example, yeah, it's very perspective, it's very personal, but still they are much more easy to adapt to it. Too much of intelligence would always have this questions on depth of understanding the purpose and the constructs of such values and morality, and so it can affect one's values and morality also, the intelligence. Then comes the emotional determinants. So there are these people, right? I mean, people, it's I mean, we can always talk about that we have a choice, but there is a nature beyond the nurture. Yeah. So there are these people who would predominantly experience pleasant emotions, and predominantly others could be where they predominantly experience unpleasant emotions, because that is what they are more susceptible to. Yeah, in a common one, I mean, if you write the sentence of your emotions, where do you put a full stop? Yeah, you might always say, oh, I was happy, blah blah, but eventually this happened. Yeah. And some other people could say, oh, I was destroyed, blah blah, but eventually I had a good party. Yeah. So it really defines what kind of personality you are based on where do you put a full stop in the sentence of your emotions. Yeah. So that is definitely a emotional determinant. This can also get affected by for people who have got excessive love and attention since childhood, or even after you grow up. Yeah, you might get a partner who excessively loves you and gives you a lot of affection. That could actually go a little negative. Yeah, because then you are now too susceptible to anything that goes negative, for example. And then catharesis, I think that this is some time back on the group we had discussed. I mean, this is one of the emotional determinants of taking out your discharging your negative emotion and your internal conflicts in a non-harmful way. Again, a very fraudulent theory. Freud had come up with this, that there is always too much of conflict inside and we have to get it out. Yeah, so which means some psychologists would even say, yeah, punch the pillow and take your anger off. But Bushman, for example, in 2002 has already come up with a paper saying catharesis with negative output of your emotions is a hoax. Yeah, which it will not. So if you're aggressive, if you want to hit somebody and you hit a pillow in imagining that person's face, that's not going to help you. That's only going to reinforce your liking of what you did, and eventually you might land up really punching that guy. Yeah, so catharesis really doesn't work. What works is discharging, yes, but discharging on an opposite spectrum, which means if you're really angry, discharge your energy more on empathetic work, for example. Yeah, so that is the premise and study of Bushman in 2002, which tells that, okay, this old approach, fraudulent approach, Freud's approach of catharesis is not really true. Self-disclosure. So it's very, very important that we can communicate and tell what we really feel and what we what is inside us. Yeah, that is really basic to a mental health. So emotional stress expressed can be in many forms of anxiety, frustration, jealousy, and envy, and also affects personality development. So if you cannot have a smooth disclosure as a person of what is happening inside you, it can really affect you negatively. And then of course it affects your your personality development also. And the last point of psychological is really the aspiration and achievements. How high do you set your goals? What are the motivating powers for your aspirations? And it varies from person to person. Yeah. How much? So really, are you on the borderline of neuroticism again over here? Yeah. Or is it too challenging? Is it too much that you cannot achieve anyways? Yeah. Then that will negatively affect you. This line, one last line, I think this is in one of our discussion, people had asked, and what does it mean for some of us? So if the person's attitude towards achievement is negative, then the achievement will not be considered as success, but a failure. Now, this is very powerful. Yeah. For example, if somebody is put into engineering to study forcefully by their parents and they hate engineering, for them, becoming an engineer itself is a failure. Yeah. So the attitude towards achieving a degree in engineering is a failure. Now, if that person tops first year, he or she achieved it. They're the topper of first year, but that will be treated as a failure. Oh, damn. Yeah. I don't want to be an engineer. So although some people might think it is success and it looks like an achievement on paper, but for this guy, this achievement is going to be treated like a failure because the attitude towards the final goal of achievement is negative for this kind of person. This is where you would see many people having this what do you say, we think that they achieved something, but they are sad. Yeah, they don't like it. They treat it as failure. They actually speak about it as if they failed in it. And we would say, guy, you got a promotion, or guy, you got the master's degree, now you can actually practice psychology. And he's like, oh damn it, I'll have to practice psychology now, for example. Yeah, so those kind of things is that what that last sentence means. So if the person's attitude towards the achievement is negative, then the achievement will not be considered as success but a failure. Yeah, a person, a kid winning a race, sprinting race, and he's now not happy because now, okay, I'm good at it, I'll have to practice more, but I don't like running, for example. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, did somebody want to say anything? I heard a unmuting mic. No, then we continue on environmental factors. So environmental factors, social acceptance, social deprivation, educational factors, family determinants, emotional climate of home or ordinal positions, and size of the family. Yeah. Social acceptance. So we are all social beings. Yeah. We are part of the social group. There is a lot of social judgment that we have to bear and adapt. There is a degree of influence that we have. There is a lot of peer pressure in teen drinking, but also corporate drinking, for example. And it drills down to what I was talking in before some time. How secured are you in yourself? Yeah. Social group, come on, let's do it, we are all doing it, it'll be fun. You are not comfortable doing it, but now you say, this my group is doing it and everybody's forcing me, let's do it. Yeah. Otherwise they will say, they will start judging, the social judgment part. Oh, you are a baby, oh, you are a scared fellow, whatever, right? They will start commenting on you, and you will say, okay, I don't want to fall for those judgment, let me do it with them. Yeah. So there is this varying degrees of influences that you will have in your social group and your social judgment. One of the examples is peer pressures, right? In teenage drinking, for example, 5 people are drinking, one person doesn't like drinking, or also feels drinking is bad. Yeah. But peer pressure, oh, we are all drinking, come on, it's fun, grow up, you are not a baby anymore. Yeah. And then this person might think, okay, okay, let me have one glass, for example. Even corporate drinking, especially on the sales side, customer facing side, if the person doesn't drink, there is always this pressure of, oh, come on, we have to celebrate, aren't you really happy? And as KL said, they might also treat, okay, you are not participating in drinking and celebrating the deal, maybe you're not really passionate. Different cultures might look at it from a different perspective, and knowing that might work against you, which means you might feel and the pressure of doing it. Here, the security of what you are plays an important role. So either you already have some social groups where you are very secure. Yeah, these are my three people. We know each other. In other places, I don't care now if this. So I can say no, I don't care. Yeah. Other than that, I think you have studied it enough, and now you know it doesn't matter. I am what I am. So it is wrong, even if everybody, for me, yeah, personally, wrong and right is always personal. So for me, it is wrong even if all of them are thinking it is right and doing it. It's fine, it's their choice. My choice is to stick to my wrong and not do it. Yeah. This is the sense of security that one needs to have while tackling the issues of social acceptance. Yeah. And this determines your personality, and it has a huge impact in developing your personality as well. Yeah. Social deprivation then immediately comes after social acceptance. So here, for n number of reasons, as aforementioned, either social acceptance, psychological or even biological, looks, etc., you might be deprived of interaction in social opportunities. Yeah. So it can start as early as in the playground, or even a small play area for kids. Yeah. Where one person is generally not entertained by the other group. Now this can cause social isolation, and this is something very severe. This can actually grow into a mental illness. Yeah. So this is something that is very, very severe now. There could also be a very huge impact because of this on development of personality, that a person becomes very self-bound and selfish now, because she was always socially deprived. So a group dynamics, a social dynamics, and a responsibility was always never organically grown in that person. So that person becomes very self-bound and selfish. Educational factors, the school, college, the teachers, peers, the value of education, and all of this has favorable and unfavorable impact on personality. How is the environment of your school and college? How open are they? How loving, how warm environment is it? How is your relationship with peers over there? Were you too much bullied over there? Are you fitting in, for example? Are you socially getting accepted there? How are the teachers behaving with you? Yeah. Are you teacher's pet? Yeah. Doing everything, making calendars for them, wiping the board, class monitor always, telling the students, being a bridge between teachers and students always. Yeah. Versus being the backbencher who is always doing musti and always a rebel. Yeah. How is that entire environment set up? And then amongst all of this, what is the value of education that you derive? How valuable is it? Just that I have to study for the society, get my marks and get over with? It's a pain. Yeah. Versus, no, I'm really learning something. This connects the dots for me now. Oh, I see the world outside based on what I'm learning, and that's why it's valuable. Yeah. So that all plays an extremely important role, and we can write a lot around educational factors. Family determinants. So family can have direct and indirect, or does have direct and indirect effect on your personality of your development. Direct could be based on how we have experienced, or we are now with some of us who are having kids. What are the child training methods at home? Yeah, this has a direct impact. And an indirect impact, a child see, child do, like a monkey see, monkey do kind of scenario. Children would want to be, or not want to behave. They would behave like their parents. Yeah, not necessarily what they tell us to do, but we would behave like our parents behave. Yeah, as kids. So that is very indirect, but a very powerful approach, and it again has positive and negative impact on your development of personality. Ordinality we will quickly check, and then the size of the family, large versus small. A large family has, I mean, as we can very naturally, I've not done a slide on this, but we can imagine and talk together. Yeah, so a large family, you might not get personal attention, but you will become much more self-independent. You will still have much more socializing skills, much more adjustment, much more agility in getting your work done. You will be much more street smart, so called. Yeah, small family would be good attention to the minutest things. Too much affection also could be the thing in the small family, but then you will maybe not develop too much of socializing skills from a larger community perspective. You will not need or develop the agility aspects of getting your work done, amounts, and owning it. Yeah, when I say getting your work done, even in small family, kids will be getting their work done, but not in terms of owning it and finding their own way out. Yeah, when say parents are not having time to give you attention, or there is no grandfather who is directly giving you full 4 hours in a day, for example, minimum. Yeah, in large family it could be really really big, and it's a small world in itself. Yeah, but then in large family again, you would have a comfort of multiple support systems for multiple different things, while in small family, there are few things which you can get support from, and few are out of bounds. For that out of bounds, you'll end up going into your selected family, which is your close friends and things around. Yeah, so that is the difference that a large and a small family could have. Maybe one or two more slides, and then we open up for discussion over here also, if there is further to add. Yeah, so how secure are you? I think we discussed this. Just one small joke so that we remember from a perspective, if we really want to itch it in our brain. I laughed at it when I read this through, so I kept it on the slide for you to remember. But anyways, next topic, social deprivation. I think we talked, and this is one of the very very severe aspects. This photograph is from one of the times in one of the places in some years back in the Scotland, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, what this photograph talks about is that there was this huge city beyond, but as we go downtown and it goes towards the water body side, the entire community over here was socially deprived, which means they were socially deprived of opportunities, work. People from, say, the different other parts of the city didn't even come down to this place. Yeah, the entire community at the end of this city was socially deprived, and this was a big government issue now. Yeah, so it doesn't only play at a very small role. It starts at a park level or a play area for a kid. It could go at a huge community level and a part of a city, for example. Yeah, so it has that kind of span. So I had read the story. It had an impact on me, so I thought I'll put the photo here. You might want to read it up. Ordinality position, yes, this has a play. So ordinality is which child you are. Are you the only child? Are you the middle born, last born, somewhere in middle, first born? Yeah, and they all have different naturally or organically characterized things. But of course, a last born can also be a leader. There is nothing saying that what your personality will be. What development effect it can have on you organically is something that they have described over here. So a firstborn could generally be a very leadership position because he or she has smaller siblings to take care of, to guide them, to boss around them, etc. Yeah, so there is this leadership quality, serious perfectionism, etc. Middle one would always seek attention because there is somebody who gives attention and there is somebody who takes away all the attention. The take away all the attention is the last born. So middle born is generally deprived and wants the attention, so seeks attention. The last born is generally easygoing, fun. I mean, there are big people, big kids who have to be serious. Anything that I do as a last child as a mistake, but the middle or the firstborn gets the scolding. Oh, you should have taken care. You are the elder. Yeah. So that's the last born environmental condition that will play, which can make him or her very easygoing, go with the flow, creative, stuff like that. Yeah. Again, this fellow is also attention seeker, like the middle child. only child again has a different aspect. Maturity, loyalty, responsibility are some of the key things that play around this personality from a nurturing perspective. But again, the nature could be where this person is again going into either a middle born or a last born. Yeah, the nature might change all of this. This is more from a nurturing environmental perspective that this ordinality plays the role. So yeah, with this, I think the personality development and the three factors, the biological, the psychological, and the environmental, the nurturing is over. I think this topic, then, I mean, we can all figure it out and write it on our own words and give our own examples. But yeah, before we move to the next topic, any other question and any other remark, any other experience sharing that you guys want to make? Are we all still there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think quite a lot of stuff we discussed on various biological, environmental, and also the the emotional climate, and some of it, like you said, are interchangeable, and that is what makes the whole personality development interesting.
Yes.
Like between a firstborn child also and the last or the last born.
Yes.
I mean, both can be leaders or
Yes.
that sort of a stuff. I've seen that change,
Yes.
and also in terms of with the second child or the more children being added, some of these you know qualities which used to probably dominate also undergo some sort of more adaptability and change. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, this is just from a nurturing perspective, but as you said, and from a nature perspective, from other factors that affect this everything could change. For example, it's not written in stone. Yes.
Jameen, just one question I had related to this, and this is from a personal experience, but I just wanted to leave it for a larger discussion, or see in terms of why it happened. So, for example, and I'm just sticking to, because we have this chart in front of us in terms of first born, middle born, last born. Uh, you know, why is it that some of the people are, let's say, if it's a leadership position, and again it could be nurture versus nature kind of a stuff, but assuming certain things like maybe leadership, or it could be in terms of looking at some sort of an independence and not being part of a team, is it because of their more of a uh, nature kind of thing, that it's there in their genes already, or is it more that they are not still comfortable with the environment or the social groups, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very big question. Yeah, it really, I don't know. From this concept perspective, as we mentioned, it could be. I mean, from my perspective, and others, please pitch in to comment. Yeah, on what KL said. But I mean, my perspective, it really, we don't know, right? I mean, it could be a lot of nature. It could be that genes, as you said, DNA, as you said. It could be a lot of nature-based stuff. It could be a lot of nurturing-based stuff. But I mean, it could be something completely different. I mean, what I mean by that is what generally we as humans show may not be what it implies. Yeah. Especially in corporate, everywhere. I mean, somebody could come across as a very strict person, but they are just too introvert and they just want to try and gel in with everybody, but it's not very easy for them, so they come out as very strict. For example, yeah, just as an example, this kind of things can happen. There could be multiple facades playing the role. But anybody else, a comment on what KL said? Any feedback from or experiences from your side? No, I guess.
Hi, Sudiksha here. I actually not sure if I got your question. Was he asking how much of it is nature and how much of it is nurture? Was it something?
KL, would you want to?
Yeah. Subiksha, so my question was like, in, let us say, certain groups, right? For example, there could be some people who quickly assume some sort of a leadership position, right? It could be even, let us say, a bunch of strangers are put together, right? And this could be even with, let us say, in many companies, what they used to previously do in the form of a group discussion, right? Where there are people who are looked in terms of what is the personality type, right? So some of them could be displaying some leadership qualities. Some people could be just observing. Some people could only talk up or open up when asked, So my question was, while they could display some sort of leadership trait, or I mean, not a leadership, emotional trait, or a personality that Jamin was mentioning here, it could be completely opposite in some other group which they are more socially accepted, as an example, right? Like, for example, in this group itself, if you look at it, maybe it's in my nature that I tend to talk quite a bit, but many people may also want to just stay away and just focus on the lecture, right? I don't know, I mean, I'm just putting some food for thought, right? It's not about whether the person is right or wrong, or how he or she is being perceived, right? But I'm just saying, just sit on the fence, or just listen to the proceedings, kind of stuff, versus some people taking charge or looking at, right?
I think there's two things, right? One is our inherent personalities and what we're comfortable doing, and also I think the backdrop or the setting matters a lot. So it may be that somebody else takes charge in another setting, but they may not take charge in setting B because of multiple factors. It may be that in setting B they're more comfortable, or their
Exactly. Yeah.
situation expects
Yeah.
them to take charge. So
No,
I think
because
we also,
because
yeah.
shifting into a social group, like if the same person was with, let's say, friends who are college buddies, right? You don't see the same type of personality play there, is
Yeah,
what I was saying. Yeah.
right. I think all of us do that. We all play to the audience, I think, on some level.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next discussion. Again, for me, it really crosses the boundary a little bit for me in my philosophical queries of psychology. Yeah, so psychology, it for me, this one is crossing the boundary. It's really talking about the self or the proprium. So there was this very nice event. Elport arranged a meeting with the great Sigmund Freud, yeah, from that time. And there is a very nice story on how these psychologists were working, so I put it over here. So he went to Freud's office, and Freud invited him inside his office. They both sat, and then Freud was completely quiet. He was just not talking. Yeah, he was completely in silence. After some time, Elport couldn't take it, so he started. He couldn't take it, so he started talking about that he saw a boy on the bus who was very upset, having to sit with a very dirty old man, where the dirty old man had sat previously, and is talking about these things. And then once he's completed this sentence, what Freud asked him is, um, very interestingly, and was that little boy you? Yeah. So I mean, this is how the psychologists communicated, right, between Freud and Sigmund. And so what Freud did was, instead of taking this as a very simple observation, he took it as an expression of what Gordon Allport is trying to tell. Yeah. And this triggered Gordon Allport at two levels. Yeah. One, he said, okay, there are some depths of psychology which goes really, really deep, but there are some things which are not really that deep, like behaviorism. Maybe it's not, initially he thought that they are not really deep in terms of understanding things. Yeah, so it has to be at that level. So this was a very nice story and episode that happened between Freud and Sigmund. Now sorry, Elport and Sigmund Freud. Yeah. So again, Freud has a huge impact on a lot of other psychologists. Either they all have challenged him, they have tried to tell him no, but they have built on top of what he had started early, very, very early. Yeah. From an Elport standpoint, one thing that motivates human being is the tendency to satisfy the biological survival need. Elport called it like an opportunistic functioning. And he noted that this functioning is characterized by reactive, past oriented, and of course biological. Yeah, this is where, say, Freud's or the behaviorist of the world would agree to. But then what he also thought was that no, we have something which is called as appropriate functioning, which is actually the manner in which we express the self. Yeah. So most of what we do in life is a matter of being who we are, rather than the behaviorism that comes from reaction, the past orientation, and biological. And so he says this appropriate functioning can be characterized as proactive instead of reactive. It could be future oriented. It could be psychological rather than biological. Yeah. So now the humanistic point of view is starting to evolve over the behavioristic point of view, which was initially started. So it's not really machine based stuff. Okay, this happens, so this is the behavior that we have. Yeah. Id, ego, super ego fighting. So the frustration comes out, for example. So he started this putting in this theory of proprium, where he said that there are two approaches of looking at it. There are two factors, and he wanted to define this very, very nicely. Yeah. The first one he calls is as the phenomenological or the self experience. Yeah. The self as experience. Sorry. So what he's saying is how we experience ourselves. So here, most important factors that we do in the self identifications are the most essentials as opposed to some incidental or accidental. So am I essentially a calm person? Sometimes I get angry, but that's fine. I look at myself as a calm person. The things which are warm or precious as opposed to emotionally cool, and central as opposed to be peripheral. Yeah. So this is the phenomenological scenario. But then the second part, and which became a big theory in itself by Allport, is the functional definition. Yeah. So he then came up with 7 functional aspects that comes out at different times of one's life. Yeah. And I think I talk about it a little later, but once we'll see the details of these 7, and we'll see that if you have already learned about Freud's stages, you will see the years that Allport calls out are very close to what Freud had also told. Yeah. But Freud is talking really in terms of stages and behaviorism. This fellow is talking more from a humanistic point of view, and it's not a stage theory at all. Yeah. So first example, it starts in the first 2 years of a life. It's a sense of a body. And there's a very nice example, the saliva example, yeah, to tell how this is evolving and now when we see this example, if you have not heard this example, you will experience it while we talk about this example. Yeah. So it's our body, my teeth, my body, my ingredients, everything is mine. Yeah. And there is nothing. That's how I see my body. The sense of my body is like that. But he said, okay, imagine now you're spitting out some saliva in a glass. Yeah. So far, so good. Now drink it. Yeah. Now you'll say, yaks, what are you talking about? But that saliva was always within you. Yeah. And then as soon as it went out of you, that's not part of your body. It's something else. And that difference of me, my body versus what came out is out. Yeah. It's not my body anymore. That is what he means by sense of body. Yeah. And this, he says, it starts in the first 2 years of our life, that we get to know and we start sensing our own body. Yeah. Then comes the self identity part. Yeah. So we start looking at things in continuation, and this is again developed in the first 2 years. So we now have past, present, future. We have a name that we start associating ourselves with. Yeah. And here is, as I said, it becomes a little more philosophical for me. Yeah. The question is, will you be the same person when you wake up tomorrow? And most of us would say, yes, of course. I mean, I'm changed, but of course. But I mean, we take continuity so much for granted. Yeah. As human beings. Yeah. And this is the part really of the self identity, that me as I am a continuous thing. This was my past, this is my present, and I will be this this is what will continue in future. Yeah. And I have a name. So this is what he means by self identity. A very, very powerful thing. If you really want to go in depth of this topic, it's very interesting. Yeah. I mean, we all take time for granted, and we all take continuity for granted, and that's something to think about. But okay, let's stick to the pragmatic stuff here. Let's continue. The third stage he talks about is self-esteem, that develops from 2 to 4 years. This for Allport is what the Enel stage is all about. Yeah, so Enel stage is the second stage that Freud had come up with. So Freud's psychosexual stages. If I remember, I'm not sure of the term, sorry for that, but he talks about oral stage, the anal stage, and stuff like that. Yeah, the way, and this is where it now, for him, the development of self-esteem is more important for Elport, yeah, as against what Freud was trying to tell. But there is another. So Erikson's theory, also industrial theory, is also there, where there is autonomy versus shame and doubt. Yeah, this is what gets starting. So this theories, we should all look at it side by side. It's very interesting how they all develop. Then the fourth topic, function that comes in is the self-extension function. Yeah, so mine is very close to me. We start with identity activities. This is happening with kids between 4 to 6 years, even a little beyond that. To be honest, some of us in this call also might be doing that, right? So we do activity play, right? I am the psychologist, for example. I am the coach. I am the expert. We start identifying not only with activities, but we start identifying with a place. This is my house. Like, for example, some people are very passionate about their vehicles. Bike, for example, for me, I'm very passionate about my bike. Now, if my bike gets a scratch, it's like somebody really punched me, not my bike. Yeah, so I get very sentimental about it. So that's the concept of self extension now, beyond esteem. The fifth also develops between 4 to 6 years, is a self-image. Yeah, my look, my social esteem, my status, my sexual identity. It is beginning of what others call as conscience, the ideal self, or the persona. Yeah, what am I? What is my image? Yeah, that starts building as a function. Then there is a function of rational coping. This is learned predominantly between the years from 6 until 12. A child begins to develop his or her abilities to deal with life problems, yeah, rationally and effectively. So it's not only about attention, it's not only about knowing my identity, esteem, but now I need to cope with my problems. I need to try and deal it pragmatically. And if this is where now you will see, if you have kids between 6 to 12, they have this deep breath. Okay, let me handle it. Yeah, this is where they're trying to do that coping mechanism. Yeah, rational coping. It is analogous to Erikson's industry stage. Yeah. And then, okay, we have one camera on. Okay, then we have the appropriate striving. So appropriate is nothing but self striving. Doesn't usually begin before 12 years. This is really myself, my goals. Now I have plans for my future. Yeah, I have vocations. I have a call. I have a sense of direction. I have a sense of purpose. Yeah, this is where you would see beyond 12 years, there would be some or the other pattern where the kids would start getting engaged towards your social reforms. No, this is wrong decision from government, black and white and pride and LGBT, I support it, etc. Blah, blah, blah. I am the proprietor of my life, which is I own it, but I also operate it. This is the function of appropriate striving. Yeah. Again, as I mentioned in the previous slide, it looks from that it's very close to what Freud was doing, but it's not. Yeah. Of course, it has, if you see the number of years and stages, it has some kind of overlap even with Erikson. But Freud is really talking about stages. Okay, oral stage develops, then anal stage comes, and blah, 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 blah. This is really functions that Elport is trying to tell us. Yeah, then Elport talks about, and this is again, for me, a very beautiful philosophy. So Elport didn't believe in looking too much into person's past in order to understand his present. This belief is most strongly evident of the concept of functional autonomy, which means your motives today are independent or autonomous of their origins. Yeah, it doesn't matter, for example, why you wanted to become a doctor. Yeah, today you are a doctor. Or why you developed a taste for some adrenaline junkiness, right? Bungee jumping, blah, 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 blah. Why you developed it doesn't matter. It is your reality today. Yeah, that's the fact that you are that now. And this is also, for example, a lot of counseling approaches are focused around this day. So cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, unlike other psychiatry practices, cognitive behavioral therapy starts with, oh, there is nothing wrong with you. Let's look at your distortion and biases now. Yeah. Rather than, oh, by the way, you got slapped in when you were in 5th standard and that has an effect of you till now. Yeah. These are the two different approaches. Okay. So here in the functional autonomy, he has defined two basic approaches. So he has the perseverative functional autonomy, this is where there are these habits that you have which has lost its original purpose, for example. Yeah, so you still do it out of habit, but the original purpose is gone. Yeah. For example, teachers, I mean there are some examples here, but it struck me as of now. So there are teachers who started teaching because they wanted to passionately make their knowledge available to kids, but now after so many years it's just become habit. They are just doing it for the sake of, they're having the habit of giving the teaching back to the students, but the purpose is lost now. Yeah, they have done it or they have not done it, whatever, but the purpose is gone behind it. For example, bless you is when your heart, this started when during the plague season, when for coronavirus times there were these plague seasons where sneezing was a very bad symptom, and so people used to tell bless you, but now it becomes like a polite gesture. So it's out of habit that we have evolved into doing some of the things. Yeah, smoking, for example, you thought it was a rebellion thing and you wanted to show that you are a rebellious person, so you would smoke out because everybody told you no. Yeah, but now the purpose of rebellious is gone. Now you're just addicted. You're doing it out of habit. Yeah. Then comes the bigger aspect of appropriate functional autonomy. Here, it's not perseverative, so it's not really habits, but it's values now. Yeah. So here, for example, I think Satya gave an example from a nature perspective that a person wants to learn. So in the current culture or setup, the person couldn't learn. But if the culture and the setup changed, the person started learning. Yeah. If it would have gone on a perseverative thing, then he would have said, okay, I don't want to learn at all. Yeah. So you were maybe punished for being selfish when you were a child. That doesn't mean that any of your well-known generosity today is an outcome of that punishment necessarily. Yeah. This is a negative way of looking at it. Yeah. So, but it is your value now. So that is why you do it. So that is value driven functional autonomy versus habit or perseverative driven functional autonomy. So these are the two autonomies that he discussed. When he and his group started looking at the appropriate functional autonomy, he also started categorizing them. Yeah, and this is very interesting. I have put a link here for some of you after the session. If you're interested, go and do your own personal test. So he categorized values, the functional autonomy part, into say 6 areas. He said that it's the functional autonomy, the values could be the theoretical. So a scientist, for example, values truth. So his value system is theoretically driven. The economic, so the value or the usefulness. The aesthetic, it is like an artistic view of the beauty of the topic. Yeah. The social, so a nurse may have a strong love for people. Yeah. Social value system. The political, so may value power. Yeah. And none of this is wrong. It's just how these are just tags given to these categories. Yeah. And then the religious, so a monk or a nun probably values unity over anything else. Yeah. And we all have these values in some or the other severity. Yeah. So some of us might be much more religious in this definition, not religious as a Hindu, Christian, Muslim, not that. The religious in terms of valuing the unity more, etc., versus say a political, which is power oriented. So there is this very nice, very small 5 minutes questionnaire on this link. I hope it's the same link. But yeah, if you fill up those questionnaire, you will get your rating across all of these. Yeah, and it's a very interesting thing to see, and it's very interesting to see it with the people with whom you generally have a conflict and discussion and arguments. For example, yeah, they might be coming from a whole different value system, and that's why you are not able to really have a coherent discussion. So yeah, yes.
I just need to add here. If you see in India, correct? So in India, each and every family, they have their own value system.
Yes.
So you forget about religion, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Culture. You go to a particularly, like let's say, go to a particular place. In that, you will find 5 family are following one value system, and the other 5 family are following another value system.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in India, it's like huge. Diversity is full of.
Absolutely. That's the beauty. But again, just to be very clear, and this is where the confusion happens. So I just wanted to be extremely clear here. The value here, when we say religious, need not necessarily mean religion driven values. Yeah. This religious category of value by Allport means something like, if you are religiously driven, irrespective of which religion you belong to, if you are religiously driven, you would be having these values of unity and etc. Yeah, that is what he's trying to tell. political doesn't mean you are a politician or you pay politics or stuff like that. The political category means you are a person who values power. Yeah, so that's the general categorization that is over here. Yeah, so it's not really one-to-one mapping. Okay, you are for example, the economic. Yeah, so it doesn't mean you are a very money oriented person. That this doesn't mean that. Yeah, what it means is it's similar to a business person always valuing the usefulness rather than the creative aspect or aesthetic aspect of it. What's the usefulness of keeping this table here in this room? Yeah, his would be utilitarian. Okay, this is the place where the sunlight is coming and this is the best place to work on. Then the economic value person would agree. Aesthetic would say, oh, it looks beautifully in the contrast to the wall where it is sitting on. Yeah, so but business, the economic fellow would say, oh, that sucks, I don't care. Yeah, so just to be very clear on what this categorization are, they are not exactly what the meaning, literally meaning of these names would be, for example. Just to because I was the victim of, first when I read this I said, okay, this means religion, this means money oriented, but it's not that.
I just brought the point because somewhere you said religion, correct? So
Yes.
That's the reason I brought this point saying.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
No, absolutely. A very, very valid point. Yeah, the last one, the religious. And again, different religions in a different setup would definitely affect your values for sure. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, Alport's, this is what I already talked about, the Freud part, but yeah, I've spoken about enough. I didn't remember I put a big quote on it already, because this gives you, if you are really interested, like going into depth of the topic. Yeah, now this would trigger you to go and search on Google and try and compare their theories and etc. It's fun. And then there are some very good books which covers all of this topic if somebody wants to go into the details of them. Yeah, the nature of prejudice, for example. Okay, so before we proceed, any comments, any questions further on the proprium, the self discussion? Seven topics, 2 appropriate, functional autonomy, and then 6 categories, yeah, or the values that we have. That is what essentially the entire topic was. If not, let's go to the third part. So Horney's social foundation. So Karen Horney, she was, so between 1885 1952, one of the best neuroticism theories have come from her, and she has a social foundation concept over what Freud used to tell otherwise, yeah, from a behaviorist perspective. So she was kind of, as far as I understand, what we call as neo-Freud. So she did agree and she did study a lot of Freud things, but then she also deferred to her. Yeah. So she has the best theory on neurosis we have even till date. Most of the psychologists agree to that. She offered a very different way of viewing neurosis. Yeah. She saw it as much more continuous with normal life than previous theorists. And she saw neurosis as attempt to make life bearable for humans, so interpersonal control and coping. And we will see when we read this, it was very interesting. Yeah, the topics that she covered, almost all of us do this. There is no topic that she's talking about from a neurotic standpoint that we don't do, or we have not experienced some or the other part of our life. But what makes it different for a neurotic person, that person sinks too fast into the negative spiral of that thing. Yeah. Just to call out some of the differences. So Freud was talking about more from a sexual experiences shaped the personality of childhood. Just to be very clear, yeah, we are not talking about harassment things over here. Freud always talked about, okay, the person now in an oral stage wants to feel things from the mouth. Yeah, the first 2 years of the age. So that is what he meant by that. So sexual experiences that shapes the personality since childhood, where Horney says that the social tensions are the crucial cornerstone for personality development since childhood. Yeah. Similarly, I think one of the very sexist remarks that Freud would always have is that the self security is much more in male compared to female, and he used terms like penis envy and stuff like that. But Honey then completely overruled it, saying no, these assumptions are not approaches of having a weak superego. Yeah, it's that there are social aspects and the social tensions that work around it, and not really gender specific. But what what both of them agree to is the famous id, ego, superego. Yeah, importance of unconsciousness shaping, and the dynamic of anxiety and defense mechanism. Yeah, I see some chats. Recording, blah blah. Yeah, I'm recording. Okay, good. So this is where the story starts of Honey over the Freud. Yeah, so she learned a lot from him, but she differed in multiple places. Yeah, two critical places. She removed the sexism out of it, so gender play out of it, out of the equation. And from childhood perspective, she called more on the aspect of social tensions, and we will look at it a little later. But okay, let's continue with the neurosis part of what she was trying to tell. So let's look at the first step, yeah, where there is a need for affection and approval, for example. Yeah, we all need affection. So what makes such a need neurotic? Yeah, first, the need is unrealistic and unreasonable and indiscriminating, which means from a neurotic standpoint, he or she would need affection and approval always, all the time, in all situations and all circumstances, right? We all need it, but we don't even expect our closest friends to come and always completely hug us for next 2 hours and pamper us completely. That's weird, right? That's really unreasonable ask, and it's unrealistic. We don't expect that. A neurotic person might expect it. Yeah, that's the difference, for example. So neurotics needs are much more intense, and he or she will experience great anxiety if the need is not met. And forget need not being met, even if they feel that this need is not going to be met in the future, they will be very, very anxious. Yeah, so that is the issue with neuroticism. Very, very quickly, the 10 items, and we can write a little bit more, a few lines on each of them, but I'm just covering here. It's very self-explanatory. So the neurotic need for affection and approval. Yeah, a neurotic need for partner, to restrict one life to narrow borders. Yeah, minimalism. Neurotic need for power, for control over others. Yeah, or facade of omnipotence. Exploit others. Social recognition, personal admiration, personal achievement, self-sufficiency and independence, and perfection and not having any flaws. Yeah, the unassailability. So no flaws can be there in me. Now, it's very interesting when you read across all of these things. There is nothing neurotic about these words or having this ask. Yeah, we all want partners. Yeah, but saying that if I don't have a partner, my life is completely destroyed, I can't live anymore, that's neuroticism, for example. Yeah, for power, for control over others. Here is where, for example, many people do need power. They want to become leaders, but not really become a bully or a boss. Yeah, that's the difference. For example, exploiting others, so finding better in others and making them work for their own growth. That's teaching, that's leadership. But really exploiting them to your personal benefits, that's the neuroticism. Yeah, so again, all of these things, if you read, there is nothing unnatural, and that's the beauty of Horney's theory. Yeah, she says we do all of these things, and we all need this for making our life bearable, for coping up with life, which is imperfect in itself. But what neuroticism comes into play is that you really get anxious if you don't meet any of this, and your asks are very unrealistic, unreasonable, and the amount of ask is always indiscriminating, for example. Yeah, so she also came up with 3 strategies, which are then she clustered all of these ask. Yeah, where she says this is why we tend to do it. So when we are trying to cope up with life, yeah, that is where one would look for affection and approval, one would look for a partner, one would try to go towards a minimalistic, so shrink their life, yeah, converge their life. I'll come to withdraw later. So these first 3 things are when you are really coping, or the coping needs of your life. You would do these 3 things. A neurotic would go to extremes to do these things. Yeah. Then comes aggression. So there is aggressiveness in you. That is where, if you are a aggressive personality, not in negative terms aggression, yeah, that goes to neuroticism. But if you are a very aggressive personality, you would go for power, control over others, exploit others. So you would want social recognition and prestige. You would want personal admiration and achievement to be recognized. Yeah, this is an aggressive approach towards making your life bearable. For example, make some sense out of it. Yeah. The last one would be when you are in a withdrawal kind of state, where you say, okay, self-sufficiency, independence is what you want. But for neurotic person, he or she cannot bear taking help. So even if they are in a bigger problem, they are almost fainting because of thirst. But for them, taking water for somebody else is even a bigger issue. They rather faint. Yeah, that's neuroticism. So okay, withdrawal and then perfection, and then withdrawal also comes to that third item. Yeah, when you're in a withdrawal strategy for making sense out of life, for coping with life, you are usually doing these three things, and neurotic person would do much more. So this really helps understand neuroticism, from what strategy the person is applying and why he or she is wanting those things. Yeah, he or she is trying to cope up with life. He or she is trying to do a withdrawal from life to make it better, or he or she is really wanting to be aggressive towards life to make some sense out of it. Yeah, so that these are the 10 things that she defined very well in her experiences and counseling across many people, and also then categorized into 3 coping strategies. So these 3 strategies, what she told from a personality development perspective from childhood, is that she called basic evil as parental indifference. Yeah, so lack of warmth and affection towards the child, that is the basic evil, which starts uh, from childhood, where people really want to go towards the neurotic states. Yeah, and even occasional beating or an early sexual experience can be overcome if the child feels wanted and loved. Yeah, but that is where, if there is a parental indifference, she said that is one of the basic evils. But if you read her history, it's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, she talks about her dad not being very affectionate towards her, but history would say it other way around. He used to travel the world, always gets her the best of the gifts and gives her a lot of time. Yeah, that's the history. But in her mindset, he did not. Yeah, so there are 3 approaches the child would give. She says the child is not basically weak, as Freud would call out. Now, she said that general tendency, if the child, and you can observe it, if some of your parents over here, right, you can observe that in the early childhood, if the child feels that indifference, feels the lack of warmth, the weakness is not the first thing. First step would be hostility. They would get angry, they would shout for it. Yeah, so that is what she said as one of the basic difference from what Freud would say. Freud would say, oh, they are very weak and vulnerable, and that is where the things start. She says, no, there is basic hostility, which means if I have power, nobody can hurt me. It goes towards that. Yeah, then there is, as the child grows, there is another feeling of basic anxiety. So if I can make you love me, you will never hurt me. So I'm very anxious that you love me. Yeah, this once a person grows, the neurotic state of the coping, for example, a partner need comes into play. So if the first one is hostility, if I have power, no one can hurt me. Anxiety is, if I can make you love me, you will not hurt me. And the third coping mechanism is withdrawal, which means I'm going to my friends, that is my circle, that's my family now. You are not my family. So if I withdraw from you, you cannot hurt me. Yeah, nothing can hurt me. So I'll just withdraw from the things that hurt me, especially people, for example. And these are the 3 tendencies or 3 coping mechanisms that we saw earlier, which feeds into those 10 neurotic symptoms for a person who then, in a very natural human tendency of coping with life and making life bearable, enters into a neurotic stage. Yeah, basic hostility, basic anxiety, and withdrawal. So these are the 3 lines. If you remember, we can then discuss, write a lot more around these topics if one wanted. This, I've been speaking a lot, and I think this needs to settle. So any questions, any comments, any feedback, any experiences anybody wants to share here before I move on? Are we still there? Can you hear me?
Also, this Jamin KL here, this basic hostility also is it also because of, let's say, if there is some aggression seen in parents, which also transfers to the child and makes them also hostile? I mean, does it pass on in
Yeah,
terms of
child,
contributing to the psychological development? Or in
absolutely.
some cases, they can also become completely withdrawn from this thing, right? Because of the
Yes,
fight of the.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, absolutely. I mean, we saw that family's indirect influence. Yeah, the child sees, child does. Very interestingly,
Correct.
somebody drew something on my screen and then it went away. I don't know if my application is hacked. Okay. Um, so child see, child does, right? So that is definitely an indirect influence that can come into the hostility. Yeah. But this hostility, what she is trying to tell over here is from a perspective that uh, when I don't get the warmth and affection that I want, yeah, the first reaction from the child, the basic reaction would be hostility rather than weakness, before even withdrawal and anxiety. Yeah, that is one of the coping mechanism. The first coping mechanism of a child would be to get angry, yeah, uh, to not being hurt with the situation.
Yeah, okay.
That is what she wanted to tell over here. That's very interesting psychological aspect, because this then we see grow up even into a personality later, beyond neurotic behavior. Yeah. So these are the three coping mechanisms a child could do, which then eventually builds on, could build on into neurotism. But I mean, one way or the other, we all do it. We all do it, but as long as it is in control and not neurotic, it's all good. Okay, so give it a thought sometimes. What?
And just one other question I had, Jamil. So
Yes.
when does a particular, you know, attribute or thing becomes neurotic? I mean, what is the boundary line or border? It could be excellence, it could be perfection.
No. So yes,
Yeah, yeah,
all of these 10 things are perfectly normal and in all of us. We all use this to make
right.
life bearable and coping.
Right. Because the reason
Neurotism.
I'm asking, yeah,
Yeah.
because the reason I'm asking is, in terms of perfection, right? So there is a client deliverable, let us say, okay. And sorry for going down a rat hole, but many a time, sometimes when we are seeing the work of, let's say, done by our team or something, there's obviously an opportunity to say, no, but I think this is what the client wants, or we could have done better in these couple of areas, either in terms of just, the visuals, or even the data that we are putting out, in terms of performance or whatever, right? So does it then tend to lead to a state of, hey, this guy is neurotic in terms of wanting to get into a perfection kind of a thing, right?
So,
Because somewhere
yeah.
I used to have the tendency that, no slide could come under my review and say, yeah, it's perfect, now we can send it to the client.
Yeah. No, I mean, as I said, right? Thank you for telling it transparently. I mean, all of us would have multiple of these things. Yeah. The neurotic, and a lot of us could have been called neurotic in past. But what neurotism essentially means is that if, for example, in your case, a presentation, you always want to make it perfect. That is your drive for perfection, which is not neurotic, which is your personality. It can be neurotic if you become so anxious, yeah, that it affects you in a complete health, mental and physical way, that you cannot allow a single imperfection, and if that goes through, your life is destroyed.
Yeah, no, so that doesn't happen. Yeah,
That is
absolutely.
neurotism. Yeah. That is neurotism. That's what the second part over here is. Yeah. It says the neurotic's need is much more intense, and he or she will experience a great anxiety if the need is not met, or even if it appears to be not met in future, which means you have given your work to the team, you know tomorrow it's going to come and it's not going to be met, and today you are sweating and you can't sleep and you are like almost having a heart attack. Yeah. So that's neurotism.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So I mean, just one thought. I mean, because it made an impact with me, I wanted to tell it to you. I mean, think about it. Yeah, we all do it. So which one do you do to not get hurt more often than not? Yeah, just think it as a retrospective sometime. Are you a hostile approach towards it? Are you anxiety? Do you have an anxiety approach towards it, or do you have a withdrawal approach towards it? Yeah. You, all of us would have some mix of these things, but which is your bigger approach, which started as a child within you, which is maybe there till date, of what do you do? What is your coping mechanism of not getting hurt, for example? Okay, but let's proceed. The last part of self theory. This again for me was a very interesting topic. I mean, I can, once I share the slides, you can read this stuff more, but this diagram, yeah. And this happens with a lot of so-called quote unquote spiritual people and stuff like that who go towards self-realization. But a psychological self-realization is actually Maslow's triangle. If you see the top, which is actualization, he said, if you reach that, you can go beyond it where there are further beautiful mind. That is how he marries East and West. But more or less from a pragmatic psychological standpoint, a realization is the actualization top of the pyramid of psychological needs of Maslow. Yeah. So a healthy person would see and be comfortable that this is my real self, and then go towards whatever the self-realization, actualization, purpose of life is. Yeah, for example, so go towards the freedom. A neurotic person would have two states: the ideal self and the despised self. And this is again what this is very similar to Freud's superego, which is conditioned, nurtured, versus ego, which is nature. Yeah. So there is always a vacillation, and person gets stuck. Oh, sometimes I'm trying to be my ideal self, but I always have a despised self, and there is a duality of things. And this is what the neurotic person would experience. Yeah, there would always be a vacillation between these states, and cannot really go towards the self-realized, actualized freedom state. Yeah, of finding a good purpose. Just speaking in pragmatic terms and not going too much into philosophy. So this is what the things are in terms of the self theory that she brought up, and it's very, very powerful. Yeah, some of the statements of these three different people mindsets is: the compliant person would always say, I should be sweet, self-sacrificing, saintly. The aggressive person would say, I should be powerful, recognized, a winner, for example. A withdrawal person would say, I should be independent, aloof, I should be perfect. Yeah, aloof of all the things that could hurt me. And while vacillating between these two possible selves, the neurotic is alienated from their true core, which is, what am I? Yeah, what is my true purpose? And that prevented from actualization of potential. So there could be a good potential within you. You could be a good photographer, a good a drawing artistic person, but because in your neurotic state you are vacillating between these two states, you will never be able to actualize and realize your self potential and convert it into actual thing. You cannot go towards your calling. Yeah, that is what she said for a neurotic person. So this diagram again for me is a very powerful thing. We should really think if we are living majorly in this dual self, or are we really going through acceptance towards the higher self? Yeah.
Jameen,
Otherwise, yes.
Jameen, just one question. Even if we are vacillating between a despised self and ideal self states, right? Will it not at some point in time, maybe over, let us say, your career, or let's say over your personal life of 20, 30 years or 40 years, settle down to your real self? I mean, I'm saying the vacillations or the oscillations could be more temporary, isn't it?
So I mean, yes, I mean, I'm not a subject matter expert in it. I imagine, yes, it would be, it should be. People would have experienced stopping of vacillation at some point in time. But here, what it means is that the point is despise self versus real self. Yeah. Again, as Maslow said, what Freud and others were doing is they were really finding these psychological cases, destroyed criminal, abused childhood cases, and trying to figure psychology. What Maslow did is, no, I will not do this. I'll look at the best people, the best humans around. And he was trying to, but even in the best humans, he found that they are all flawed. So you can be flawed, but you don't have to despise. It's not your despised self. It is your real self. It's every human is being flawed. And that is the mindset of a healthy person, where you are not despising it, and there is not always a vacillation, but you are saying, oh, this is what I am. These are my flaws. I'm fine. And I go towards improving them. Yeah. That's the difference in the approach of both. Yeah. Can one approach lead into another, settle into other or not? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. Then most important slide. Thank you. Any comments, anything that anybody wants to call out? Was it too fast? Was it okay?
Very, very good presentation, Jameen, and thank you. And like other presenters, certainly it helps in terms of understanding it better versus reading it yourself. And more importantly, the fact that all of us are focused in terms of addressing the section A questions, which are your the 1,000 words type of thing. So conceptually understanding that is very good. And the other thing is you'll add this or have Manisha add it to the the chat group in terms of the media so that we can refer this material.
Yeah, I will share the material.
Okay, great, fantastic.
Thank you, Jameen.
Thank you, Satya. Glad you liked it.
Thank you, Jameen. It was really great. Wonderful.
See, the thing here is like now going through the study material will take time, correct? So
Yes.
once this session, then you go through the study material like faster.
Yes.
You can catch up things faster.
Yes.
So
And then you can write a lot in your own language now, right? So that's the fun part.
Yes, that's the fun part.
Yeah. Okay, I will stop the recording, and if there are